Now I know that some of you, like myself, have spent so much time in the weapon selection screen trying to decide what feels right that you can probably find certain weapons with your eyes closed. So when I took a small break from my favorite weapon, the Romero 77, I thought I would give a bit of a review into what I wasted my hunt dollars on for the good part of a month. Unlike my favorite, reliable Romero, which boasts a high base damage, slow cycle time, and pretty average special ammo types, I went for a weapon that was recently updated to have a little extra pizzazz. This weapon boasts a high base damage, slow cycle time, and pretty average special ammo types. I'm not sorry. The crossbow, a novelty weapon for people who like to sit in corners, or the high-flying circus-type players that don't mind being the noisiest hunters in the bayou. While I don't think that this weapon fits into the kind of spot that a person should primarily use over and over again, like a main weapon, I do think this weapon can lead to some of the most fun you can have in Hunt, and should be used on special occasions to spice up your time. While it struggles with being dependent on the rest of your loadout, and the traits that you use, the investment isn't too heavy, so you won't have to break the bank or collect a stockpile of leveled up characters in order to use the crossbow. But without too much dilly-dally, allow me to lead you into the only crossbow guide that you'll never need. As suggested by the title, this weapon sounds a lot better on paper than it actually is. As mentioned before, it has high base damage, low cycle time, and a surprisingly short fall-off distance at only 20 meters. This is around the range of most shotguns, limiting the basic crossbow to a short or medium range engagement. The bolts can be recovered, just like hunting bow arrows, and while they do not penetrate surfaces, they do automatically apply the bleeding effect, adding pressure to any opponent you tag in an engagement. It is almost a requirement to take the bolt thrower perk, since it knocks almost 2 seconds off of the reload time for the weapon. Without it, the cycle time feels incredibly labored, and punishes your bad positioning a lot more than it needs to. Bolt thrower is only 2 perk points anyway, so it's not too much trouble to slap it onto a legendary hunter, but it's easy to notice if you forgot about it. The other drawback to the crossbow is that it suffers from a devastating bullet drop. While many people complained about bullet drop being added to Hunt Showdown 1896, the crossbow had it almost the entire time, and probably for good reason. With the base damage so high, close range shots are almost always a one-shot kill, so preventing this weapon from also being effective at range is a necessity for balance. With that being said, telling somebody to aim higher than that just doesn't put enough weight on how much drop the crossbow really has. Actually, that's much better. That is the explosive bolt, the most fun special ammo type for the crossbow. It takes the bullet drop to a whole extra level, dropping even faster, but with the benefit of a decent explosive capable of sending an entire team to their medkit slots, or worse, the spectate screen. I often found myself firing these off at enemy players rather than at bosses, though I should note that the area damage around the explosive is limited when compared to a direct hit. While it's still capable of one-shotting an enemy hunter, it more often takes 2 proximity blasts, as seen performed on me here. A fun note about the ammo, though, is that it is still silent when fired, meaning that you can surprise enemies with this ammo type and then skulk back into the shadows and prevent any retaliation. If you're more worried about the damage you do on a hit, though, Shot Bolt is for you. Instead of a normal bolt, it's got a shotgun shell attached to the front, maintaining the damage over longer distances. Effectively, this ammo type trades your damage fall-off for bullet drop, so you may have a harder time hitting targets from a distance, but landing a hit is more significant. Editing note: I almost forgot to mention that the shot bolt adds penetration. It can only go through thin walls, as seen here, but I'd be remiss to not mention it at all. Sorry to interrupt. I quite like this ammo for some reason. Considering my aim with the crossbow, I shouldn't, but I kept finding myself equipping it. It feels like it belongs in the weapon, even if the ranges I engage at may support a default ammo type choice instead. As with everything, I encourage you to try it yourself and see what you like, but I wouldn't feel any shame recommending this ammo type to another player. The last ammo type, however, I do have more difficulty suggesting, the steel bolt. As I mentioned before, the drawback to the crossbow is its lack of ranged consistency, with harsh drop and damage fall-off. Steel bolt reduces the base damage, but increases the fall-off range and decreases bullet drop, effectively high-velocity ammo. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel significant enough. I often call high-velocity ammo, which is basically what the steel bolt is, headshot ammo, since the travel time is reduced, but the damage is often too low to go for consistent body shots. Steel Bolt feels the same, but since there's still a decent travel time, it feels just short of being reliable for what it claims to do. I don't know that I would go so far as to say it needs a buff, as it's recoverable and it still applies bleeding when it hits a hunter. It just doesn't feel as intuitive as high velocity ammo is. I'll also add that I'm not great at aiming. This is the only time I managed to line up a crossbow headshot. The crossbow only has two weapon variants, Basic and Deadeye. I'm not a huge fan of the iron sights, and the Deadeye isn't really all that much zoom for a scope, so I don't have that many comments on which feels better to choose. My brain puts the Steel Bolt ammo with the Deadeye scope more often, but I can't say definitively that it helps more, so whichever you feel like using, know that they're both rather cheap. So try them out, take the one you like, no judgment here. To close up my thoughts on the crossbow, I think I would have to hesitate to say that it's a bad weapon. Its special ammo types are fun, and while a perk is almost required in order to use the weapon, it doesn't feel like you're limiting the rest of your options just to run it. The damage from the crossbow is good enough to hold its own against another solo, although when you start running into larger teams, some more consideration is required. I found myself taking higher damage pistols like the True Shot along with the crossbow, which helped finish off enemies tagged by explosive ammo or longer range Steel Bolt shots. Alternatively, any semi-automatic sidearm like the New Army or the Bornheim also works, but the New Army and the Officer are probably more helpful since they won't really rely on the bullet grubber trait. Overall, I would give it a Waldman's rare item out of 10. It's not the best thing in the world, but it can definitely hold its position over bad weapons. Its disadvantages are common for the game, and its advantages are hard not to take advantage of. If you're in the mood to blow somebody to smithereens or simply skulk around the compound all quiet, I would certainly recommend the crossbow. Jackal, take it away.
Boy, have I waited for this moment to arise. It's ugly head. It ain't the most loved of all weapons you've seen, and like the Sparks or Mosin Sniper, a lot of the memories made with this weapon are bad. But you don't have to be a corner-huggin', crouch-key-lovin', silent little sneaky-beaky wimp in order to love this crossbow. Behold, Explosion. Or if that's too much for ya pea brain, Small Explosion.
It's outside.
Just about inside now.
Get it now for the low, low price of the longest reload time you can imagine one shot to take, and a couple of pennies, and then pray you don't miss. Oh dear, what's wrong with you, boy? The crossbow, the mortar on wheels. AIM Labs sold separately.